Breaking news. Putin's troops in Crimea run from cluster bombs as a drone is shot down. Reports indicate that Russian troops are retreating from cluster bombs over Crimea after a Ukrainian drone was shot down in the area. During Kyiv's retaking of the key strategic settlement of Urozhainy in the Donetsk region, the Ukrainian military released footage showing U.S.-supplied cluster munitions, which spray bomblets across a wide area, being used against Russian forces. Ukrainian forces have successfully retaken the village of Urozhainy in the Donetsk region. On Wednesday, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry published a statement on X. Moreover, Interfax reported on Wednesday that Russian forces had shot down a Ukrainian drone over Crimea, the latest in a series of what Moscow calls terrorist attacks. The Russian Defense Ministry made the announcement on Tuesday. Crimea, a Ukrainian peninsula on the Black Sea, was annexed by Russia in 2014. In the midst of a growing diplomatic dispute, this comes as Ukraine has blasted as ridiculous the suggestion by a NATO official that it might be possible for the country to cede territory to Russia in exchange for alliance membership. More than a dozen ex-inmates who spoke to the BBC allege they were physically and psychologically abused by Russian officers and guards at Taganrog's pre-trial detention facility No. 2. They were eventually freed as part of a prisoner swap. In the midst of a growing diplomatic dispute, Ukraine has blasted as ridiculous a suggestion from a NATO official that it might be possible for the country to cede territory to Russia. According to the Norwegian newspaper VG, NATO Chief of Staff Stian Jensen suggested to reporters on Tuesday that Kyiv may have to cede territory occupied by Moscow in exchange for NATO membership. Significant progress is being made, he said, on the question of Ukraine's potential NATO membership in the future. Everyone has an interest in preventing a recurrence of the war. Russia's military is in terrible shape, and expanding its borders seems impossible at this point. The question is now more what Ukraine can reclaim. The advisor to the Ukrainian president, Mikhailo Podolyak, had a strong reaction to this news on X. To paraphrase what he wrote, trading territory for a NATO umbrella? It's totally absurd. As the author puts it, that means deliberately choosing the defeat of democracy, encouraging a global criminal, preserving the Russian regime, destroying international law, and passing the war on to other generations. Give up territory in exchange for NATO protection? That's just ridiculous. This would be a conscious decision to let democracy fail, to back a global criminal, to keep the Russian regime in place, to undermine international law, and to hand the burden of war on to future generations. The question is why Russia should care. In response to Russia's threat to attack shipping after Ukraine's grain export deal with Russia was abandoned last month, a container ship sailed from Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa on Wednesday, bound for Istanbul. The Joseph Schulte, which is owned jointly by a Chinese bank and Bernhard Schulte, is following the established corridor and passing through the territorial waters of Ukraine, Romania, and Turkey, to allow for a safe passage of southbound vessels, according to a statement released by Bernhard Schulte Ship Management, BSM. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, cargo ships have been stuck in Ukrainian ports. Last week, Ukraine announced a humanitarian corridor in the Black Sea to release these ships. After a new Russian attack on Ukraine's grain export infrastructure, the Hong Kong-flagged Joseph Schulte left the port on the 23rd of February 2022. Photos of destroyed storage facilities and piles of scattered grain and sunflowers were released by the governor of the Odessa region, who claimed that Russian airstrikes had damaged grain silos and warehouses at one of the Danube River ports. The port was identified as Reni by the president's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, and its governor, Ole Kuiper, who described it as an important facility for grain shipments. Moscow did not issue a statement right away. According to a reliable source within the sector, port operations have not ceased. Kyiv's deputy defense minister said on Wednesday that Ukrainian forces had retaken and fortified the southeast Ukrainian village of Urozhainy from Russian troops. Urozhainy liberated, Hanna Maliar wrote on Telegram. Our troops are positioned strategically on the perimeter. Ukrainian forces have been pushing south and east against Russian-held territory since early June, when the Donetsk region village was declared liberated. Russia did not immediately respond with a statement. Bloggers from the Russian military have reported heavy fighting in the area around the village, with Russian forces attempting to stop the Ukrainians from bolstering their positions in Urozhaini. If the village is retaken, it will show that the Ukrainian offensive drive south towards the Sea of Azov is continuing, with the goal of halving the number of Russian occupying forces. Urozhaini is located about 90 kilometers, 55 miles, from the Azov Sea. Despite Ukraine's previous boasts of retaking neighboring Staromayorsky on June 27, Urozhaini is the first village it claims to have retaken since then. Kyiv claims that the massive Russian minefields and well-prepared Russian defensive lines are slowing down the progress of its counteroffensive push. There was no way to independently confirm the reports from the battlefield.